Did you have an extremely difficult breastfeeding situation, yet you still knew that was what you wanted to do for your baby and for your family? Today's conversation with Lisa is a reminder of what so many of us go through to try to feed our babies. She faced so many barriers along the way, and she persevered because she knew that this was what she wanted for her family. But this is such a great example of somebody who both loved the experience of breastfeeding and also found it so extremely difficult. She describes an experience that I myself am very familiar with, of feeling lost in the experience and feeling misunderstood by people in her life who might not have understood the full extent to which she was struggling. I had the privilege of working with Lisa as a lactation consultant virtually when she was ready to wean. And so you'll get to hear what that experience was like as well. I give you Lisa.
When I began breastfeeding, I was blindsided by how difficult it was. Having known only a handful of people who had ever done it and only seeing it up close a couple of times, I had a huge learning curve. Since then, I've become a doula, a childbirth educator, and an internationally board-certified lactation consultant, or an IBCLC. I'm your host, Lo Nigrosh, and I welcome you to the Milk Making Minutes, where we explore the systemic medical and cultural barriers that make feeding our babies so difficult, so that you know your baby feeding struggles are not your fault, and your triumphs really are the miracles you feel they are.
All right. My name is Lisa. I live in Western New York in Niagara Falls, and I'm a first-time mom of an 18-month-old baby with a big personality, and I live with my hardworking partner, Anthony. And I just recently founded a new company called Empowered Birth Coaching, so that's very top of mind at the moment.
Yeah, awesome. And do you do that both virtually and in person?
I do.
Okay. Amazing. So we'll hear a little bit more about the type of coaching you do,
Sure.
because most of us who get into birth and lactation work do so based on our own personal journeys. And so I have a feeling that what we hear today will lead us to hearing about the type of work you do for your clients.
You are absolutely right.
Yeah. Before we start talking about your own journey, though, I want to take you way back to your childhood, to your cultural upbringing, and have you talk about your exposure to baby feeding before you were thinking about it yourself, and any memories you have of either breastfeeding or bottle feeding, and what your memories are of seeing babies feed.
Sure. I thought about this because I've been avidly listening to the podcast, and I knew you were going to ask this question. I don't have many memories at all. Everything that I knew about breastfeeding prior to even considering becoming a parent was stuff that I had heard later, but never actually witnessed. My mom said that I was bottle fed. I was the oldest. My sister was nursed for about 6 months.
Hmm.
And my brother, the youngest of three, was nursed for a year. And even though
Wow.
we were 7 years apart and I was very involved in parenting him, I have no recollection of it. And it makes
Wow.
me wonder if it was done behind closed doors.
Mm.
I couldn't tell you, but I knew this question was coming and I thought, how interesting is that?
Yeah, that is really interesting that you were 7 when he was born, and he was breastfed for a year, but you don't have any memories.
None.
Either that, I don't have a ton of memories from my childhood. Either that, or it was just so normal to you that you didn't think twice about it.
Could be.
Yeah.
And from that point on, as I grew up, all I ever saw was bottle feeding.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow. And so then when you were preparing to become a mom, what were you thinking about in terms of birth and breastfeeding? How were you leaning as you were preparing this part of your life?
So I know that this isn't a birth podcast by any means, but I dove into research the minute that I found out that I was pregnant, or even leading up to trying to get pregnant. And it was almost as if I was trying to become a midwife. That's how into the information I got. I read everything I can get my hands on. I listened to every podcast. I could recite evidencebased.birth.com. And I know that I'm not the norm, but I'm definitely a birth nerd. So once I came across the research behind the benefits of breastfeeding, it was like, for me personally, and I know this isn't everyone's story, I was going to do whatever it took.
Mm.
And so I felt that a big part of my birth outcome and that experience was going to directly affect my feeding experience. And I worked so hard to have a natural, unmedicated, magical birth. And that is what happened. But I wasn't prepared for postpartum.
Isn't that the way it goes? I think we can't be prepared for postpartum given how little support we have culturally to raise children. We're just so
100%.
isolated. Even in the best of circumstances, you might have supportive family who will come once or twice a week and help. That's not how we evolved. And even that amount of support is so little compared to the large social groups we evolved into.
Yeah, and I remember I had a phenomenal OBGYN who 100% followed the midwifery model. In fact, she started the very first birth center in the Buffalo area. And so that's not the norm. So I had this OBGYN that was essentially a midwife and was just incredible in making sure that I had the experience that I wanted. And I remember asking her multiple times in my prenatal visits, which were always about 45 minutes to an hour each. So I'm talking a real gem of an OB. And I would say, I think I want to prepare for breastfeeding. I want to have support lined up. I've done all this other research and preparations, and I feel like there's this missing piece with feeding. And I've heard that it's challenging at times, and I want to be ready for that. And she would say, we send out a lactation consultant that's affiliated with the birth center, and she'll come right to your home.
Mm.
And now I know what I know, but at the time was like, oh, that sounds like plenty of support.
Mm.
I wish I had listened to that inner voice a little bit more, because as I get into my story, I feel like I would have benefited from having more tools in my arsenal.
Mm.
You've heard me now for a few months talking about how much I've enjoyed getting home cooked meals delivered right to my front door from feastandfettle.com. And I'm here today to tell you that if you know somebody who is in the postpartum period, who you would like to provide true support to, that you should go to feastandfettle.com and order home cooked meals to be delivered right to their front door. One of the biggest barriers to breastfeeding success is a lack of support. A new parent is feeding a baby up to 15 times a day. How on earth do we expect that person to feed that baby that many times, also feed themselves, and provide meals to other members of their family? There's not enough time. You know how hard it is as a busy parent yourself to try to put meals on the table. Go to feastandfettle.com, use my code MILK, MILK, coordinate which meals they would like to have delivered, and send them a week's worth of delicious meals. And be the person who
eases the burden for them. What a gift. I can't think of a better way to support somebody in the postpartum period.
Yeah, and that's a great starting place for them to
Mhm.
have a lactation consultant available that comes out to the home. That's really rare.
Right.
So, it's great that they offered that.
And I'm not joking when I say I probably interviewed 8 or 9 practitioners in choosing who was going to support me in my birth. And didn't realize how valuable an IBCLC was as well, that the person that was coming to support me in my home was not an IBCLC. And although she was incredible, we'll get to it, but I do think that there are some benefits to connecting with an IBCLC specifically. In preparation for this podcast, I looked back at my text messages with her in those early postpartum days. And it was almost as if every 7 to 10 days I was reaching out. I'm still not feeling like this is clicking. I'm still
Mm,
struggling. I think I need more support.
yeah, that is so hard.
It's funny because it's almost like I put more time and energy into selecting a breast pump prior to birth. I never used the
Mm,
damn thing, and I wish that I had known what I didn't know about having those support people ready to go on hand. And the last thing I'll say on this is something that you had said once, and it resonated so strongly with me, which was that so many times throughout my struggle, and I don't want to paint a negative portrait of my breastfeeding days because it was an incredible experience, even though it was so challenging. But one of the things you said was for your mental health, you chose to continue. And I felt the same way. So every time somebody would suggest switching course, wasn't what I needed in the moment. What I needed in the moment was this is what you want. This is what you feel is best for your family. We're going to support you getting there as hard as it is.
mm,
And so I often would weigh that in my mind, like, what is best for my mental health? And I would always come back to stay the course. And that is
mm,
not for everyone. And I want to hold space for people that make the tough decisions to switch off their original plan. I support
mhm.
them 100%. And I think that's so powerful in its own. But for me personally, it was stay the course.
For your mental health, you had to continue, but let's get into how it started off. You had this amazing magical birth experience, which you knew was supposed to set you off on the right foot for baby feeding.
Exactly. Yeah, I would say that golden hour and the optimal cord clamping and baby on my chest for what was probably 2 to 4 hours because we were completely undisturbed was all magic. And he latched within that first hour so organically, but it definitely didn't feel good.
Mm,
And I won't get into it, but my husband had been up for 4 days dealing with a blizzard because he does a lot of wears a lot of hats, but one of them is commercial snow plowing. He slept and regained some energy while I laid around with the baby immediately after the birth, and
mm,
he was latched for I don't know, 4 hours,
mm,
and I didn't know anything different. And he was content and I was content and we were all just living on the high. And we put him in the car and we went home and my OB said, "Sleep for 6 hours and then you can wake the baby because we want to get you feeding again." So we did that, and I joke that 6-hour stretch of sleep was the last time I got a 6-hour stretch of sleep
no.
up until a month ago.
Oh my gosh.
And it's hilarious, but also so true. I'm not even
Yeah,
exaggerating.
I
And
know.
we just kept breastfeeding, but it hurt a lot. And I
Mm,
remember the morning after, so I gave birth at 1:30 in the morning. The next morning at 6 a.m., we went home. And I remember looking at my nipples and noticing I want to call like little sores. They almost looked like little glands that were like coming out of the nipple, little like bumps coming out of the nipple. And I said to my doula, that doesn't look right. And that's what's really hurting. And she said, oh, it's probably the way that he's latching. We'll get it all figured out when you get the visit from the lactation consultant. And I came home on a Saturday morning. Our parents came over at noon, which looking back, I'm like, that was really quick to have visitors.
Mhm.
And I didn't see that lactation consultant for another 36 hours because of the way the weekend fell. And I really think there's something to be said about having immediate support in the moment, because it was almost like every hour that went by, that nipple pain was getting worse.
Mm.
So it didn't feel good from the start. And when the lactation consultant came, she was great. She came right into my bedroom. I didn't have to move around the house to make her comfortable, which I really appreciated. And I was comfortable with her. I'm not a shy person by any means. And she was teaching me how to correct the latch, but that pain would not go away.
Mm.
So 5 days later, I'm reaching out again. I think something is still off. I understand nipple soreness, but everybody tells you it's not supposed to hurt.
Mhm.
So she came back and we tried a bunch of different holds, which I feel like different holds can be really tricky with that tiny of a baby. I found as we got older and he became more durable, all those different positions became really great and useful. But in those super early days, I felt really constricted to just that cradle hold, which required hunching over. And nobody could have prepared me for the physical taxing on my body in those first 8 weeks.
Mm.
After the second or third visit, which I'll backtrack really quickly. Every time I wanted her to return, we had to play the whole insurance company game, and I had to reach out to the OB and they had to clear additional visits. Apparently, one visit is the norm. And I'm like, this is not enough. I'm so far from feeling like we've got it. So every time I would reach out to her, then we would reach out to the insurance, then we would reach out to the doctor, we'd get the clearance, then we'd get the clearance from the insurance, and like days would go by.
Mm.
And to your point, when you're in it, and I was not sleeping at all, you don't have the energy for this back and forth game.
No.
You
It's enough for
don't.
anybody to give up. Yeah.
Exactly. Eventually, I would say that latch improved slightly. And I do recall her saying, because I started talking tongue tie, lip tie, could there be something throwing this off? And she said, there's a slight possibility of it, but it's not overwhelming. And she gave me some mouth exercises to do on the baby. And I remember thinking, I am barely surviving on what felt like an hour of sleep per night. My baby would have this cycle of where we would feed, and then he would be in agony, squirming, pulling his knees up, gassy, looking so uncomfortable and so much pain. So we would play this game of feed and then immediately tackle the gas problems. And then he would eventually pass out after screaming for what felt like 3 hours. I thought maybe he was colic. And everyone was just like, this is normal. Their bellies are so underdeveloped at this stage, and he's fussy because of this. We weren't sleeping at all. And I just didn't have the energy to throw in mouth exercises on top of all the other things that we were trying. He would feed, his feeds would last about 3 to 4 minutes. He would fall asleep before I could get him to the other side. I had it in my head that you were supposed to switch sides. And so I was like, something is wrong. He's not feeding on both sides. He's pulling off, milk's getting everywhere. I was leaking like crazy. So there was definitely something that just wasn't working for us. And the pediatrician was super supportive. but I just wasn't getting to the bottom of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've, in talks with you, wondered, could there had been a revision that could have helped us? I'll never know. But that was like the first 8 to 9 weeks.
Yeah.
Consultant did the best she could in that moment.
Exactly.
If I could talk to her in a professional setting over a cup of coffee, I would say, hey, maybe you should be sending clients who are asking about tongue tie to somebody who can do a more thorough assessment. But she also has the best of intentions and is doing the best she can in the moment, just like you were doing the best you could in the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We continued on this path of 3 to 4 minute feeds on one side at a time. I remember
Mm.
I had to wear a thumb ring on the side that he fed on
Mm.
because I'm not exaggerating when I say I was so sleep deprived, I couldn't remember which side he fed on. We would do 3 to 4 minute feeds. He would then pull off and refuse to continue on. We barely ever switched sides. And then 45 minutes later, he would be very hungry and very upset and very squirmy. It was like watching a clock 24/7,
Mm.
which was so not healthy.
Mm.
And in those first 8 to 9 weeks, I remember recording everything in a journal, which I later burned.
Literally?
Oh, yeah.
That's amazing.
Because as time went on, I recognized that my baby and my experience was so different than the norm that I stopped reading the books. I stopped asking friends what they were going through unless they
Mm.
wanted my support and validation. But because comparing our situation or my child to anybody else's at that same developmental stage was just hurting us.
Mm. I love that.
Yeah. So things like feeding without a cover.
Mhm.
My baby would never ever feed in public because there was too many distractions.
Mm.
In fact, it was so difficult even in my own home. I would be in the nursery isolated from everybody and everything because of the distraction piece.
Mm.
And if he heard a voice down the hall or even footsteps, the FOMO would kick in and he could not focus on feeding. So
Oh my goodness.
I struggled a lot with engorgement because if there was anything going on other than just like the two of us in the house in the quiet, it would prevent him from being able to focus. And we were already doing these quick 3 to 4 minute feeds. And I remember the pediatrician, one of the nurses at the pediatrician saying, I think he's just a super efficient feeder. So I grabbed onto that. But I do wonder at times if it had more to do with potential oral ties. Who knows? At 7 weeks, I tried to introduce a bottle because the 45-minute feeds were, although kind of the norm, like it just seemed a lot. And we tried the bottle and we tried the bottle and we kept trying the bottle. And I tried it and my partner tried it and my mother tried it and my mother-in-law tried it. And we bought every single nipple on the market and it didn't matter.
Mm.
Bottle refusal, super strong. Same with the pacifier. And I would
Would he
say
spit it out?
spit out the pacifier. And then with the bottle, he would suck on it for a couple minutes and then spit it. Or you'd spend 45 minutes trying to get him to take the bottle, and then you would look and he would only have taken a quarter of an ounce. I would say about 8 months of consistently trying, like where we would have a wedding to go to, or I would have something that was really important to me, like a social event. Tuesday night was the only night that I would consistently go out of the house in the evening because nights were so hard. We dealt with some serious separation anxiety that started at 4 months old. And I remember everybody saying, there's no way that's separation anxiety. He's too young. But it was.
Mhm.
And I would go 30 minutes away to a dance class. It was an hour and 15-minute class and then a 30-minute drive home. And I would cry all the way to the dance class. And then I would
Mm.
dance my heart out and feel like a person again. And then I would cry all the way home. And then I would hear him screaming bloody murder when I would drive into the garage. And
Ugh.
then I would run in the house and couldn't get my shirt off fast enough to feed this, what felt like starving baby.
Mm.
And I know a little bit more about supply now, but I definitely think all of the struggles would intensify in the evening because I think my supply, as it does for many, wouldn't be as strong in the evening. And it just felt like he wanted to nurse every 15 to 20 minutes in the evening, like from 6 o'clock on. I
Mm.
remember a few months in to postpartum sitting my husband down and saying, I cannot manage visitors after 6.
Mhm.
It's too stressful. The baby is crying for hours at a time. I don't have it in me to be handing off the baby because our families want to hold this child. I can't sleep hearing that. I feel like he needs me. The anxiety was so intense at night. And so that bottle was like something that I was like, if I could just get him to take a bottle, I could maybe take
Mm.
a nap during the day, or if I could just get him to take a bottle, I could go to my dance class without this guilt that was like paralyzing.
Mm.
But I will give myself just a little bit of credit. I never missed that class. So I postpartum, 13 weeks, I felt physically ready, pelvic floor in good shape to go and get back into dancing. And I have not missed a class since, unless we were like on vacation, but that was rare.
Wow.
That was, like,
Good
the
for
only
you.
thing that really kept me going in terms of if I could just get to my dance class and dance out all the stress and anxiety and anger
Mhm.
and resentment and exhaustion.
Yeah.
And the
I'm proud of
class
you
was
for
late
that.
at night. It was, like, an 8:15 class, so
Mhm.
it was hard to get there because I was like, "Can I make it there driving without falling asleep?" is a question. No, I wouldn't put myself in harm's way, but you get the
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So the bottle refusal was really tough, and I will say that my pediatrician is so incredible. She's this holistic pediatrician that actually offers a virtual hour every single week for new moms to just chat with her. I don't know of any other pediatricians that would give an hour of one-on-one time, and she's
No, that's amazing.
absolutely incredible. Purely peds. I can't say enough good things about this practice, but at one point she said, "Lisa, what would happen if you just stopped trying with the bottle?" And I finally said, "Oh my gosh, like that would be freedom." I packed the pump away, I packed the bottles away, and we've exclusively breastfed from that point on until I weaned. And it was just nice for somebody who was like a professional in the field to say, "It's okay. It's okay."
Yeah. Sometimes we can't give ourselves permission to do something for whatever reason, and I wish we always could, but sometimes we just need somebody else to do it
Yeah.
for us. Yeah.
And I had a lot of weird guilt going on about our caretakers. My mother-in-law and my mom really wanted to be able to feed this baby, like for the
Mm.
connection and to help us out. And when we would go for important family events or friend things that were more than 3 hours long, it just was such a big piece of separation. And I couldn't give that to them. And it's ridiculous when I look back and think about the pressure I put on myself, like as if that's on me. But I dealt with a lot of internal struggle because I've chosen human milk feeding and because I've chosen nursing. I've created all these other difficulties for me and everybody. And it's not how it should be. And that's just, I
Mm-mm.
think, a little bit of the postpartum anxiety that was taking over.
Was that truly
internal, or was that also coming from external sources?
I think it was a mix. Thank God my husband and partner, so supportive. In fact, I always say the reason I had such a great milk supply was because he was on top of the cues. He made it his
Mm.
mission to be, and this is who he is, just so observant, detail oriented, knew how important breastfeeding was to me and did everything he could to snatch that baby out of whoever's arms he was in when he
Mm.
saw him rooting, or if that little cry started. Because he knew what a struggle we had, if my baby was too worked up, you brought him to the breast, forget it. If we passed a threshold of upset and fussy, feeding was destroyed. And then I was uncomfortable because I was engorged. And then the baby got more and more hungry the more he cried and burned up all that fuel. So my husband was like, the second he saw a sign or a cue, he got better at it than I did, I swear. He would bring that baby to me in bed or on the couch or wherever I was and make sure that baby got fed. It didn't matter if we were at a family party or whatever. And when I was having such postpartum anxiety, I had a hard time taking the baby out of people's arms. I don't know if other parents feel this, but I felt like this insane amount of guilt, especially because no one around me seemed to breastfeed. Everybody bottle fed in my very immediate circle. So people didn't understand. And I can't tell
Mhm.
you how many times people were like, that baby's never going to get used to anybody else. And the reason that he has separation anxiety is because you guys are attached at the hip. And oh my gosh, these messages, they were very hurtful.
I am so sorry. I wish that people could hear themselves saying that. And it wasn't your job to do this because you had enough going on, but I wish somebody could repeat back to them, never. Really? Never? You're talking about a baby right now. Babies are supposed to be attached to their parents at the hip, A. And B, do you really think that because my baby only wants me right now, that they're never going to go off to kindergarten, that they're never going to want to play on a sports team, that they're never going to want to go over to their friend's house, that they're never going to go off to college, that they're never going to try to sneak out at night when they're teenagers? Like, you're being silly right now. You're using a term to try to shame me because my baby loves me most of all. Isn't that what you want from my baby? Don't you want my baby to be so securely attached to me that the only thing they want in the world is me?
It's so true. And I am not the type to be walked on. I'm not the type to be influenced. I'm not the type to be bullied. I think that I fed into my own like internal struggle because I was like, this is not who you are. But I was so sleep deprived and so anxious and dealing with so many of those postpartum challenges that so many of us go through. I did not have the energy to fight back.
Nor should you have been expected to. And you have mentioned postpartum anxiety multiple times. So whether it was diagnosed or not, that is real. Those feelings are real. That hormonal shift is real. And that is enough to deal with in and of itself, that internal struggle, that there is no reason for anybody to have to fight external struggles on top of the own voices in your head that you are trying to convince that you are okay, that you can do this, that what you're going through is going to be okay in the end. There was no reason for you to have to defend yourself to other people. I just wish that there was some fairy that popped out and said to all these people, listen to you. Never is a strong term. Yes, right now in the temporary, this baby only wants his mother, but it's not never.
Especially people that saw me struggling. I was very vocal. I will say, like, I was one of those first time moms in postpartum saying, this is harder than I could have ever imagined.
Mhm.
And there must be something that I'm messing up here because my child will not sleep. I'm talking 25-minute naps, waking up 10 to 12 times per night, well into, I would say, about 12 months old. And just so many things that I think, yeah, it just made it hard. So I was very vocal. People are like, "How are you?" I'm like,
Thank you.
"Not good." I am so incredibly fortunate, so incredibly privileged in terms of I was the director of human resources for my father's franchise. And so much of my identity was my work. And I took an initial 3 months off. And when I was approaching the end of that 3 months, I said to my dad, there is no universe where I am prepared to come back to work right now.
Mm.
And I remember having such intense empathy for people that have to go back at 12 weeks or sooner. It's not okay. So I extended my maternity leave an additional 3 months because I had that privilege, and that is not lost on me. I am
Mhm.
so lucky to have had the owner of the company, my family, who understood and saw what I was going through and knew that it wasn't coasting by any means. There was nothing about my job that was as hard as what I was dealing with. And I had an extended maternity leave that does not exist for most. And that
Right.
makes me incredibly sad for them.
Mhm. It's another barrier.
It's another barrier. And I'll be honest, at 6 months, I still wasn't ready, but I guess I felt like maybe I can pull myself out of this hole mentally if I had something else to focus on. Sometimes I do regret. Sometimes I really wish I had taken a full year off. But like I said, we don't know what we don't know. I was trying to switch it up to think maybe I'll feel more like myself if I return to work. And this
Mhm.
was virtual. I basically said, I'm not coming back unless I can be 100% remote because this baby will not take a bottle. I'm not sleeping. I don't have the capacity to drive to and from work right now. I don't have the capacity to listen to him scream the entire time that he's with his caretakers, which is basically what was happening to an extent, depending on who it was. And I was, again, fortunate, privileged, lucky, blessed. It is not lost on me. That is not everyone's experience.
Yeah. 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 And still it was hard.
It was so hard. It was so
Right.
hard.
Yeah.
Every day I was
Yeah.
like, why am I doing this? And I just circle back quickly because you had also just validated me in so many ways when you started talking about addressing the whole situation opposed to just looking in a baby's mouth. Anytime I put my baby in a car seat to drive to my mom's house, my parents were my primary caretakers at the time. My mom is retired. 30-minute drive, which isn't a big deal. My baby would scream bloody murder the entire drive. I can't tell you how many times I would pull over, get him out of the car seat, nurse him to calm him down, assuming he was always starving, put him back in the car seat, screaming bloody murder. I recall vividly like punching my steering wheel to the point where like my fist was bruised because I was so overstimulated and I could not deal with the crying. It's that crying that was it's innate for babies when something is really wrong. And I
Mhm.
remember being in the car thinking multiple times, this stress hormones that he must be releasing could be harming him. And I remember spiraling out of control in my head, like, this is not okay. And I now know that it's possible that his airways were not open properly. And maybe he was really uncomfortable in that car seat. Who knows? So it was like I just kept coming up on things where it felt like, okay, if I could just get to my mom's and then she can give me a hand and maybe I can lay down and she can take the baby and I can focus on something else for 5 minutes. But getting there was so stressful.
Mm.
And she was driving to me a couple days a week too, but it was just like maybe if I just get out of the house and then I would regret leaving the house.
Mm.
Things like
Ah,
that. Things like that.
I
I guess at 7 months I did baby-led weaning. And that was a huge learning curve because I think that I told myself, like, if you can get to solids, it'll take some of the pressure off because other people will be able to feed him. You'll be doing a mixture of the two. And I didn't realize that it was going to take a few months before he was grasping that concept, getting enough intake where it actually counted. So that just felt like an eternity. but he's a great eater now, and I'm glad I stuck that out. My initial breastfeeding goal was 12 months, and then we hit 12 months, and I remember thinking, we are so not ready to wean.
Mm.
And I remember thinking, we are finally hitting a stride here, because at this point, we were actually switching sides. He was still incredibly fast, maybe 7 minutes per side,
Mm.
but I could stretch the feeds to 2 hours, which was life-changing.
Mhm.
And then there were certain little bits of food and things that he was eating to help. So there was, like, all of a sudden this light at the end of the tunnel.
It didn't feel as hard.
Mhm.
And so the thought of ending right then felt like we just got here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then that was from about 12 months
Mhm.
until
So then at about 16 months, I started recognizing that he was eating solids really well. And we were just having such a struggle with the separation anxiety and the caretakers, but he was very comfortable with my mother, my father, my husband's mother and father, my husband. So we had made mega strides with the separation anxiety, which was great. And my mom said, listen, I really think that you would do better if you had a little bit of separation from him. And I agreed with her at this stage, because my exhaustion hadn't really improved significantly yet. And I didn't have the patience with my toddler that I wanted to have, that everybody else had, because it was us all the time and I wasn't sleeping yet. And we worked out a couple days a week where I would drop him off at my mom's and then go work away from him. And with that came more and more practice with solid foods, more and more comfortability of us being separated. It just started to feel like, wow, this is really good for my mental health. And I
mm,
made the decision to maybe start weaning. And
Low here popping in for just a brief second to let you know that Lisa and I connected over Instagram. And somehow I found out about her difficult breastfeeding situation. And she mentioned possibly wanting to wean, but thinking it would take forever or that it might be impossible at the point where she was, but that her mental health was dictating that it was time to start moving in that direction. This is one of the things I feel really passionate about, is helping people wean safely and in a way that feels good for them and for the way that they want to nurture their kids, however that might be. And so we had a virtual consultation and we worked out a very detailed plan that had lots of different options for Lisa to try. And it was specific to her family's dynamic. She had several avenues she could take or try. And we emphasized that there is no wrong step and that you can always have a do-over when it comes to weaning, and that you can take each day at a time and decide what feels best for you in that moment. And so you are going to hear Lisa describe what her weaning journey was like. And I'm so excited for you to hear that.
we did it in the reverse order, I think. Now I know that people typically start in the evenings or overnight. And what worked for us was the day. That's how we did it. We gradually weaned throughout the day, and then we would nurse all night long. And I am so grateful to have found you on Instagram, because I remember thinking, I don't think I'm going to be able to wean overnight. This baby's
mm,
not going to allow that. I just could not see steps ahead of us. I was like, there's no way. He needs my comfort all night long. I don't know how we're going to just flip a switch, but we gradually did it. And Friday night, so just a few nights ago, was the very first time my husband put the baby down for bed successfully.
Oh.
And it was such a turning point. And I was like, how funny that this podcast recording is like a few days from now. And I'm
Mm.
able to actually say on air that it's not going to all fall on me forever.
Mhm.
And I came home, my husband was like, I put the baby down, he barely fought me. It was such a great experience. And he slept really well that night. And we're down to maybe 1 to 2 wake ups throughout the night on a good night. And then, of course, we still have some bad nights. Like last night, I got the baby down at 10 o'clock, and by 11:30, he was up, and I was like, oh, it's such a like up and down, but
Yeah.
we're making significant progress. And for me to even just be sitting here in an office where I can't hear him crying because he's probably not crying and he's having the time of his life at my mom's house, I just never thought I would get here.
Mm.
And the last thing I want to say is that I made the decision, ironically, the week that I spoke with you and reached out to you for weaning help. And trust me, if I had known you were out there sooner, we definitely would have been connecting a lot sooner. But the same week that you and I spoke and created a really strategic, thorough, detailed plan, which is right up my alley because that made it feel doable. Because you were listening to me and giving me suggestions that actually felt like they were doable for me and our family, opposed to just, here's how other people do it.
Mm.
And that same week, I decided to go on a medication for the postpartum anxiety and also depression, which I guess I didn't realize I had, but now I know that I definitely struggled with both. And within 4 days of taking that medication, I felt like myself again.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it.
And I just want to say that because I am the crunchiest, most holistic person out there.
Mhm.
And I was so afraid to like try this avenue. And thank God I did. And I just hope that people are out there that are considering it, but it's not their typical choice. I urge you to consider it because it's a temporary solution. My therapist was so good about saying, listen, Lisa, you're trying everything. You're trying yoga postpartum. You're doing your meditation. You're breathing. You're journaling. You're talking to people. You're doing all the therapies. But what you don't have control over is the fact that you haven't slept in over a year. And
Mhm.
maybe the medication would help take the edge off because that sleep deprivation is so real. Especially for me, I'm the type that needs my sleep. And some people can function on less, but it really took a toll. So I just wanted to say that and be open about that because I think we need to normalize whatever help you need. And thank God I did it when I did it because weaning brought a flood of emotions that I wasn't anticipating either.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if you really want it, it can
Yeah.
be so challenging because it's a different hormonal shift.
Yep.
And
That's,
there's also the emotional connection to it. So it's both the physiological hormonal shift and the emotional shift.
yeah, threw me for a real loop because it's something I really wanted and I had thought long and hard about it. And I thought it was best for me, best for the baby, best for our family. Felt really good about the decision and still do. But wow, did I cry and feel that pain and missed it. And
Mm.
I it's emotional, wow. And maybe not for
Mhm.
everyone, but I remember thinking I don't want to know the last time we're going to feed. I can't handle it.
Mm.
So
Mm.
if someone asked me, I don't remember. I can't tell you like what day it was or when it was, but I will never forget the first night we made it through without nursing because that was like I think I texted you that next morning and I said, I can't believe we did it, but we did it. And in my mind, it was like, there's no turning back now. Like, you've got this.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's my story in a nutshell. And I just can't thank you enough because You came to me at the perfect time. The universe sent me that support. And I think when you're 16, 17 months in your journey, sometimes you talk yourself out of needing the support.
You've been doing
Ace.
it for so long, it becomes your new normal, and you
Yep.
think, "I'm just gonna bend and grin and bear this and hope that our situation changes at some point." And I validated this for you in our consults, but I'm just gonna say it again because there are people listening who have been in a situation like yours. Your experience was innately difficult. And sometimes when we recognize our own privilege and can know that other people have life circumstances that are harder than ours, it's hard for us to say, this was really hard. And it's hard for us to own the difficulty. And we think, why do I need medication for this anxiety or depression when so many other people have so many other challenges? Or why does this feel as hard as it does? I wanted this baby so badly. I wanted to be a mom so badly. I wanted to breastfeed. I'm the one who chose this life. Whatever the excuse for our misunderstanding of the difficulty is. So I just want to validate for you and for anyone else who has had a baby who wakes 10 to 12 times in the night and who only wants them and nobody else and who refuses bottles and who only screams in the car seat, that is innately difficult. If
I
you are the
appreciate that.
only person who can put a baby down to sleep, you do feel a little bit like a prisoner as much as you love that baby.
And because we recorded this quite some time ago, I knew that Lisa had some updates to her weaning journey. And so I asked her to share what those updates were. And she sent me this recording.
So fast forward to 19 months old, and we are completely, fully weaned. I never thought we would get here, and it's done a lot of positive things for me. And I like to think my babe wasn't easy. I don't know here right now if it hadn't been for your support, Lo, because when you and I had a consultation regarding weaning, you were confident and you had real suggestions that felt good to me. And a lot of the things that I had read and heard about did not feel aligned at all. And I thought that it was going to be like everything else, a massive struggle. And although it was not easy in the least, it happened faster than I thought. I couldn't tell you the last time we nursed. I didn't want to know. I was not anticipating the emotional turmoil that I would go through. I'm assuming a lot of that was a drop in hormones, but I had a solid 3 to 4 weeks where I cried all the time, and I think I was very sad that our journey was coming to an end, but I had to do pros and cons and weigh the benefits because our sleep was horrendous and hadn't improved since he was born, really. So I have no regrets. I still have some sadness, but I have no regrets. And my mental health has never been better. I'm really buying into the notion that if I'm good, I'm a better mom. And I'm here to tell others who have to make the hard decision to end their breastfeeding journey, even if there's still a little piece of them that wishes they could continue. It's okay. It's okay to do what you need.
It is possible to wean and both feel good about the way that you've done it and support your children and your family while it's happening. And often when you're just doing the Google rabbit holes to figure out how to do something, there is not the information that you need that is specific to your situation. So if you are in this situation and you are thinking you would like your body back, or you're feeling touched out, or it just feels time for you to wean, I would love to be the person that helps you create a plan that's specific to your body, to your family. If your partner is gone at night for work, it's not going to make sense to have them take over the feeding plan. If you have high milk supply or oversupply, your weaning journey is going to be different than somebody who doesn't produce as much milk. If you are prone to mastitis, your weaning journey is going to be different too. And I love providing that personalized help to make sure that people feel really good about where they are in their weaning journey. So reach out to me, www.quabbinbirthservices.com, and we can get that scheduled. I then asked Lisa to share an update about her coaching business because she's had a lot going on and she has a passion for supporting other people, not only through the birth, but for preparing for the postpartum period. So this is what she had to say.
Just wanted to give a quick update on some exciting things happening with Empowered Birth Coaching. We are launching a workshop very soon called Registry Rehab, part of my mission to revolutionize the gift registry industry. We are prioritizing services and support over stuff. My goal is to work with pregnant people to break down all of the different rip the rug from under these big box companies that are lying to really get pregnant people asking themselves the right questions about what kind of services and support they need as an individual to care for a newborn. We want to really change the way that we think about registries, and we are doing so with the support and partnership of Be Her Village, which is a fabulous, easy to use online registry that helps you add services such as lactation support, pregnancy coaching, meal trains, some of the out-of-box ideas and things that are extremely helpful postpartum but are often not included in a registry. So we are very excited to launch that. And if you are a listener and you find me on Instagram, send me a DM, tell me that you heard this podcast, use the code MILK, and I will make sure that you get 15% off both coaching services and our registry rehab workshop. So stay tuned for more info on that.
How many of us put a bunch of stuff on our baby registries that it turns out we didn't really need? The founder of Be Her Village was a guest of the Milk Making Minutes, and she shared her breastfeeding stories. And so I will have that linked in the show notes as well for you to listen to. But it is so important for us to be thinking more about the support we need during the postpartum period than about the stuff, because babies need very little stuff in the end. They need to be fed, they need to have their diapers changed, and they need to be cared for and close to their parents. And as long as that happens, there really isn't a lot else that babies truly need. Being able to utilize something like Registry Rehab and Be Her Village is a great way to figure out what are the things I truly need and how can I get the support I need, given that is one of the biggest systemic barriers to successful breastfeeding. I am so grateful to Lisa for sharing her story with me and for trusting me with her weaning journey, and also being willing to share how that went on the podcast. It is so important for people to hear that breastfeeding can be something you both love and deeply struggle with simultaneously. We are complex beings, and we can hold multiple feelings about something we do at the same time. And so often when somebody is struggling to feed their human baby human milk, their feelings about the struggle get turned around on them as if they should just end the struggle immediately. And I know so many people who struggled and still were not ready to give up on their breastfeeding journey, because even though it was difficult, it was something they wanted to continue to do for themselves and for their children. So we can hold both things for people. And stories like Lisa really highlight those emotions. And one great way to either support yourself or somebody else in the postpartum period is to go to feastandfettle.com and get $30 off using my code MILK, same code MILK, and have home-cooked meals delivered right to your door for the duration of the postpartum period. Whether that's just while you're recovering from the birth or while breastfeeding remains intense for you, just taking that one thing off your plate would make a big difference. So check it out, use my code, and let somebody else cook for you. And with that, I hope you have a great week. We'll talk soon.